I forget your name or make a joke and no one laughed? Did I come across as stupid or did I come too fast? This isn't a brave face, this isn't a brave face, this is a mask.
This one's gonna be a bit more dark. After my first couple trips to the psych ward, I developed a natural or unnatural, depending on your perspective, really, intrigue with psychology. Now, my predilection for categorization meant I always felt a affinity for topics of pathology, and I wanted to share a bit of what I've learned through my years scrutinizing a notoriously polarizing science. I've prepared a few visual aids, and by prepared I mean blatantly stole from Sean Cross. But if he's half as invested in mental illness as myself, I figure he won't be too cross with me. As I always say, better to ask for forgiveness than to deal with the anxiety of asking permission. Anyway, boost him algorithmically by checking out his social media, hell, maybe even order a commission. Art like his tends to be chronically underrated, so do the world a favor in the same way I'm trying to, and show your appreciation. Oh, and one more thing before we get started. Most of the disorders on this list require you to display a majority of the symptoms on a regular basis, usually in such a way that it impedes daily function. So, if you think you're suffering from one of these disorders, you're likely just a hypochondriac, seeking validation, or genuinely should consider talking to a doctor and looking into that disorder with them, because that's not my job. I don't even have a job.
As each descending peak on the LCD took you a little farther away from me,
Now, this one's going to be short, sweet, and to the point, because it's taken me way too long to put this video out, and I just really need to get it done with. So sorry to anyone suffering from this one who isn't getting the proper attention they deserve, but hey, I hope you like my song choice. Cotard syndrome, in simple terms, is the belief that someone is already dead. That's shorthand for a deluded perception of reality, occasionally involving psychotic beliefs that one is missing organs or other vital components for, living. Now, I'm no stranger to thinking I'm dead. A person who's seen the world through my lens would understand how one could confuse life with the idea of hell and perpetual torment, but according to every doctor I've spoken to thus far, I'm only figuratively heartless. Now, Cotard syndrome has a lot in common with some of the personality disorders on this list, such as its base element, denial of self.
I was hit as a kid, I was good but then I quit. Everyone that tried to fix me knows that I can't change a bit. I've got no shame, got no pride, only skeletons to hide. And if you try to talk to someone, well then someone has to die. Once you chase me down the hole, yeah, once you think you're in control, you believe that we are partners and you're feeling comfortable. Oh, then the darkness rolls in and you'll forget who I have been. Oh, but you love it. This is...
Now, a psychologist and myself came to the concordant conclusion that I exhibit most, if not all, the symptoms associated with BPD, not to be confused with big penis disorder, another very serious illness. Despite all evidence, I've yet to be identified with a single access to mental illness. Very sloppy. Healthcare providers, very sloppy indeed. Now, a person with this disorder has little in the way of a discernible identity. Characteristics such as personality and emotion are in a state of flux, making social intimacy particularly difficult. Now, oftentimes those afflicted will become reliant on others for validation, as their very identity is affirmed by the perspective and affirmations of others. Now, this is incredibly difficult due to the volatility and lack of sustainability in relationships where one day you're the single most valuable aspect of someone's life, and the next you're their arch villain. Now, this black and white mentality, funny, really gets people into some bad situations. Now, while not all of this knowledge is available just in the DSM or whatever, all this relevant information I'm divulging is available in I Hate You, Don't Leave Me by Hall Strauss, the only book I've read more than 5 pages of in possibly the last 5 years. You can find a link to the audiobook on Audible in the description. Audible, for all your book listening needs. Sponsor me.
Show me how. Show me how you like it done. You're all mine. I'll make you feel like you're the one. Take off your clothes, give me your trust. Look me in the eyes and confess your lust. Get on your knees, beg me to stop. I promise I'll love you if you do it, so do it for me.
Now I find myself sitting comfortably in a position where I'm not currently desperately craving attention and admiration like usual, aside from the whole starting a YouTube channel for admiration and attention bit, but let's not focus on that. My provocative and explicit nature has gotten me into trouble more than a few times, something I'm sure many with histrionic personality disorder can relate to. While my understanding of HPD isn't as comprehensive as my understanding of borderline personality disorder, the bullet points are this: desperately craving attention, using any means necessary to garner attention, even suicide attempts and self-harm, and very frequently a flirtatious demeanor. Much like with the previous disorder, the actions of those afflicted are often caused by issues with self-image. Both disorders also find themselves in the cluster B personality disorders category, as they often exist simultaneously and share many qualities. A histrionic person will have an excessive need for everyone's attention, and whether it's through outward appearance or the presence of what I like to call manic facade, they will get that attention they want, even at the expense of others' discomfort or embarrassment. Kind of like when someone said, "Pass the ribs at Thanksgiving family dinner," and I said, "Ribbed for your pleasure." I was not invited back next year.
Schizophrenic.
If you haven't heard of schizophrenia, I'm gonna have to kindly ask what rock you've been living under for the past few years. Between people somehow managing to remain unaware of one of the most famous debilitating mental disorders, and a social worker I met referring to it as parapsychology, I'm at my wit's end with ignorant plebeians. For those that do understand schizophrenia, you probably know it's everyone's favorite Axis 1 psychotic disorder, but many might not understand the scope and range of this affliction. You see, Psychology is still putting together the pieces on this one, but what we do know is brain chemistry plays a large role, and it's a chronic condition that can only be treated, not cured. The major components are auditory and visual hallucinations, but an often undervalued symptom is general logical delusions, such as they're all trying to kill me, or I am funny. Yeah, right. The disorder in and of itself is tragic, but in my personal opinion, only half as tragic as society's general lack of comprehension and understanding. All the seething, scorn, and avoidance won't be very positively impactful on someone whose cognitive abilities are spotty at best, but that won't stop people from fearing what they don't understand and ostracizing those deemed abnormal. Ignorance is bliss for bystanders, but hell for those whose conditions necessitate understanding. So ask yourself, who's really crazy? The mentally ill, or those who shun the weak and broken for a false sense of security, damning humanity to a repetitious cycle of abuse? Yeah.
Pick out her heart with a kitchen fork, pin down her arms, and wake from the scar, still feeling sick. Where did it get started?
Commonly falsely grouped in with other empathy disorders like psychopathy, antisocial personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of disregard for the rights of others. Now, you need to have been diagnosed with a conduct disorder before a certain point in time, which personally I disagree with based on the premise that competent mental health resources are not always available. And hey, maybe it's a bit ostentatious of me, but then again, that is my modus operandi. It's not the fault of doctors. They're being asked to perform miracles using sloppy science. They're doing their best. Honestly, just like all the documentation on this disorder, I'm talking far more about things you couldn't possibly care about, like diagnostic criteria, instead of the disorder itself. In simple terms, it's an aversion to people, a deep hatred even. Someone with this disorder might steal, lie, break the laws, and lack regard for the safety of themselves and others. So pretty much me from ages 17 to 20, maybe longer. Not that I'd fit the symptom quota, but Rapid City Regional suggested I had a conduct disorder, so chew on that little tidbit. One of the most important things to remember about these disorders is that even with the frightening inclusion of apathetic symptoms, being a murderer is not the default. In fact, only 20% of the prison population has APD, 12% have major depressive disorder, and substance abuse disorder is also very high amongst prison populations, but that sounds more like a party than a mental illness. Yeah.
That's the only one I believe. Reality's bound by what I conceive. Picking the scab and watching it bleed. Behind the wall where I can't be seen.
Now, taking a break from the big scary disorders, we've got a frequently overlooked form of mania. I can't exactly understate my disappointment about not hearing of this one sooner. After all, philias, phobias, and manias are my favorite dinner table topic, not to mention it's one of my own maladies. While the fun ones that get the most press are usually kleptomania and pyromania, maybe even a little bit of nymphomania, my personal favorite, I'd wager dermatillomania is more prevalent. It's a simple one, just picking at scabs, dead skin sometimes, even living tissue depending on the severity, but the main component is an obsessive predilection for the activity and being mostly unable to stop. I say mostly as Much as I'd like to get into that, there's a fun little public service announcement at the end of this video that covers the subject perfectly, so stick around for that.
I'm the ache inside your head. I'm the pain you gotta end. I'm the fire in your room. I'm the people that you bend.
Now I'd like to end this one off on an accusatory note. The most common misconception about mental illness is just how much agency someone has over their ailment. Don't get me wrong, the mentally ill aren't devoid of any culpability for their actions. That's a far more dangerous, slippery slope. But if people were generally not at the whims of their illness, there wouldn't be so many people hurting each other for seemingly no reason. Now, the legal system does display a shockingly poor understanding of psychological ailments, and that might be a video idea that I could get into. I don't know, find out next time. Moral here is, next time someone says something to the tune of, just get over it, or I don't understand why you don't stop acting like that, make sure you're responding correctly by telling them to go fuck themselves and, maybe read a book. I hear the DSM-5 is a bestseller. The funniest part of living with mental illness is people expect you to act as if you don't. And always remember, that's life.